If Bitcoin is predicted to reach $1 million by 2030, can gold go up to $10,000? And are the factors that will lead a gold rally up to $10,000 the same ones that are probably going to drag Bitcoin up as well? The answer could be yes. Well, in the financial system that we're seeing right now, it can only survive basically with QE to infinity. It may only be a matter of time before we see the world piling into inflation hedge assets like Bitcoin and gold. 10K for gold might sound crazy, but there are some factors that could send its price up to the moon. First, let's talk about BRICS. With the price of gold currently around $1,800 per ounce at the time of recording, a more than 5x move for the $10 trillion asset class seems like an impossible goal. Much like Bitcoin going to $1 million, a 50x move approximately from where we are right now. But I must first point out that gold won't go to $10,000 in a vacuum. Right? There are reasons for these things to happen, just like Bitcoin won't get to $1 million overnight. No, in fact, a lot of stars need to align for this to happen. But really, a lot of it's about the decline of the US dollar over time, and of course, really, of all fiat currencies is going to be a major driving factor in seeing that price go up. And one world leader in particular, he has had enough of the US dollar, and that is, of course, Vladimir Putin. He's been doing his best to build the yellow brick road toward a new reserve currency created by a group of countries called BRICS. Earlier this year, he announced that Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, the BRICS group, are working on a new basket-based reserve currency. There's also interest from other countries who are also wanting to de-dollarize, countries like Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, one of the big wild cards here, all wanting to join the BRICS group. The issue of creating an international reserve currency based on a basket of currencies of their countries, it's currently being worked out, and gold is part of the plan. Putin said at the BRICS Business Forum that we are ready to openly work with all fair partners. The 5 countries are also trying to create an alternative mechanism for international payments, he added. The case for why the BRICS countries would use gold, it's pretty gosh darn simple. More monetary freedom. They want to receive a solid currency that they can control, or at least have a larger say over, in return for their goods, and of course to avoid sanctions so they can transact freely without the Western countries dictating their moves. The head of ING, Chris Turner, said, "Safety, liquidity, and return make a great reserve currency," which is why BRICS could potentially look toward adding gold into that basket. If they're worried about the path of sanctions and the increasing weaponization of the dollar, they, like Russia, might prefer to move into gold. Now, this could definitely be a strong possibility here. Russia, of course, is the 3rd leading gold producer in the world, so it's of course no surprise that over the decades it has dramatically increased its gold reserves. It's also telling that these countries are already dabbling into the world of crypto and, of course, of central bank digital currencies. These countries went out of the US dollar system. Is it possible we could get a gold-backed stablecoin in the future in the forms of a BRICS currency? Certainly interesting food for thought. And of course, that's all happening at the same time that Russia is about to allow Bitcoin for international payments. So it's a very interesting coincidence, if you will. Now, the second reason that gold could boom, and the same reason that Bitcoin could boom, and those other store value assets, right, is because of increased demand from central banks around the world. You see, gold does well in recessions as we see investors turning to gold for its perceived safety. It has produced positive gains in 5 out of the 7 last recessions. Now, as fears have been escalating over the last year, central banks have been preparing for the worst. Demand for gold has increased all over the world. From central banks in particular, we're seeing huge buying sprees. According to the World Gold Council, demand for gold increased by 28% in 2022. Central banks have been boosting their reserves big time with gold, almost as if never before. Q3 2022 saw a 55-year high demand for gold from central banks, with them buying a record 399 tons worth of gold, around $20 billion worth. That's almost double the previous record during the same period from back in 2018. Now, countries like Turkey have been leading the way with their gold purchases, followed by others like Uzbekistan, India, Qatar, Mozambique. right? We're seeing a lot of interest from central banks to get gold. And while the data set is yet to be published for Q4 2022, we can already expect a big mention of China and Russia. Now, China outed itself as one of the world's mystery buyers of gold in December 2022. Reuters actually came out and said that China's central bank added about $1.8 billion worth of gold to its reserves in Q4 2022, bringing their cumulative value up to around 112 billion. That's around 1,980 tons of gold, giving China the 6th largest official gold reserves in the world. And when they look at what happened to Russia and being cut out of the international system, it's no surprise they're buying gold. Also, Russia, of course, unsurprisingly, major buyer of gold, considering the role in BRICS and, of course, and sanctions. No surprise there. Gold is moving from the West to, well, elsewhere, and sooner or later the West is going to realize they could be falling behind in the race for hard money. Now, before we dive into supply issues and inflation, just allow me to break the flow real quick here, let you know about Wealth Mastery. It's my weekly, value-packed crypto newsletter and investor report. Every week, over 50,000 readers are getting it straight to their inboxes and receiving the latest on NFTs, altcoins, DeFi, technical analysis, and much, much more. Please use the link down below to sign up for free. It's free, so check it out. Okay, now let's talk supply. Australia is the world's 2nd largest gold producer, and they are predicting that the global gold supply is going to fall after 2022 and throughout the rest of the decade. That is a pretty interesting statement. Now, according to the data by the Department of Industry, Science, Energy, and Resources of the Government of Australia, or DISR, whatever. Global gold supply is going to increase by 2.7% to 4,791 tons in 2022 compared to 2021, and then fall after 2022. So after 2022, the DISR predicts that the world's gold supply could actually fall at an average rate of 0.7% each year to reach 4,630 tons in 2027, meaning gold could be slightly flat to negative throughout the rest of the decade. This is on the basis that lower gold recycling activities are going to drive a fall in supply. And finally, we have to talk about inflation. Of course, we always talk about inflation when we talk about gold. Now, inflation in the US may have peaked back in June of 2022, but that doesn't mean that higher than normal inflation rates are gone for good. In fact, they are still here without a doubt. An increasing number of analysts are comparing this decade, the 2020s, to that of the 1970s and even the 1940s. There were 3 major inflationary spikes over the course of those 2 decades. The COVID pandemic could have just been the first of multiple major inflation spikes yet to come in this decade. Of course, during the COVID pandemic, the real kicker for inflation was the fiscal policy and, of course, the issuance of those stimulus checks, which ended up costing so much money for people. This saw money go directly to people and therefore straight into the economy. Also, the banks, and they got the front run everybody. Now, these days, it seems that we are never far away from any kind of crisis. This is the kind of crisis that are going to require extreme money printing, such as the energy crisis in Europe or the climate crisis, which is already upon us. We could all see massive fiscal stimulus being proposed again as a way to solve these, and of course, the next round of higher inflation. So there are a lot of factors that could lead the price of gold higher in the coming years, and many of those same factors that could push gold higher could actually provide a big boost to Bitcoin as well. The world order as we know it, it's undergoing one of the biggest shifts that we may have seen since, well, any of us have been alive, or most of us have been alive anyway, depends on how long you've been alive, but right, that's the rise of the BRICS group. This could be a major challenge to the Western powers. The inflation crisis also probably a long way from being over. During times such as these, I'm actually pretty happy to have a fat bag of Bitcoin, but also a modest little stack of gold, just in case. Okay, that's it. Subscribe now. See you next time.